How you doing? My name is Dante Luna, and y'all gonna think I'm a little crazy, but I brought you to a comic book store here in Somerville, Massachusetts. I'm actually, just to let you all know, I'm actually a big fan of comic books. I got nothing wrong with comic books. I love comic books. When I was younger, I was a little bit more into it when I was younger. I have an uncle, actually, like, see the tattoos on my hand? Those are my uncle's kids right there. My uncle, he used to get in the habit of going to jail, and every time he got arrested and went to jail, I'd go upstairs to his comic book collection, and I'd rip out a page, and then I would send him the picture that I want, and he'd paint, or he'd draw a portrait, he'd recreate the picture I'd send him, he'd send it back to me. So it's like my connection with him was through comic books, and so I mean I never stopped liking them. I haven't read one in a long time, but I really appreciate and love comic books. So let me take you inside. I'm gonna introduce you to a friend of mine. His name is James, here at Hub Comics. Let's go inside and check him out real quick.
My name's James Welborn. I own Hub Comics in Union Square, Somerville, Mass. I own it, run it day to day. I have one employee. He works the counter and that sort of thing, but most of the time I'm here, me and my dog, sitting behind the counter. I've been a comic fan since I was a kid, and I'd always wanted to own a comic shop. A friend of mine from high school visited a couple weeks ago, and he walked in and he said, "This is exactly what I expected." He said, "You've been talking about this since you were in high school, and it's, you've been wanting to own a comic shop since you were in high school, and it's like a dream come true for me because I get to stock it with everything that I love, all the products that they solicit. I kind of still have some of my fanboy attitude of knowing what I think is going to be cool and what looks good. But I've gotten older, and I have a more literary and refined sense of things as well, and for the comic market right now especially, there's a lot of great stuff out there that isn't just superheroes. There's a lot of autobiography and high concept sci-fi that isn't just capes. There's a lot of good stuff out there that's for people my age as well. In college, I originally planned to be a high school math teacher. Then I realized that would actually require me to take math classes, and that was not going to happen because generally those were every day at like 9 a.m. and I wasn't getting up at 9 a.m. in college. So I did what I loved in college as well. I did journalism. I was a newspaper reporter for a little while. Dropped out of college. Was a newspaper reporter. Was a graphic artist. Then worked when we started switching over, starting a website for the newspaper where I worked. I had always programmed as a hobby, so I became a webmaster for Vegas.com, which was run by the Las Vegas Sun newspaper where I worked. So yeah, from there I got a job in high tech, moved to Boston, and started doing that for 10 years. And eventually that's when I decided I wanted to get out of high tech and start my own comic shop, which had been a lifetime dream. I've been lucky in that I had a high tech job that paid me partially in stock options. So when my stock options were worth some money, I started cashing them in and collecting the books I'd always wanted. 1940s, Golden Age, Captain America, for example. I had a full run of Batman and things like that. And those type of investments hold value even in rough times, because they're not making any more Batman #1s. So when I wanted to open a comic shop, it was kind of a choice of, do I go out and look for new funding, or do I just use my collection to kind of finance myself to do what I've always wanted to do. And I probably wouldn't be the best role model when it comes to business, because I had the location that I wanted in my mind, and one day I was walking to work and saw a for lease sign in the window and jumped on it before I had my business plan fully formed, before I had the money in hand or anything like that. I immediately called the guy and said, I'd like to take a look at the place, and it was everything I wanted, and it was the exact location that I'd been dreaming of, so I just jumped on it. It made getting everything up and running a little bit slower, and economic ups and downs have made things hard, but they say, do what you love and the money will follow. Well, I'm still getting to that money will follow part, but but I'm doing what I love, and I every time I come into the shop, I love just talking to everybody about what interests them, what comics they love, what characters they love, what kind of stories they like to read. There've been a few studies where they talk about comics as a medium. People who read comics when they were younger have better vocabularies as they get older. They score better on SATs and things like that. People who read comics when they're younger have better interaction between the lobes of their brain, the right brain and left brain. One of them controls kind of your verbal interaction, and the other controls kind of a visual interaction. And in comics, you get both. You get the verbal and the visual, and when you're reading, you're kind of switching between the halves of your brain better. My wife, she never read comics, and she finds it kind of hard to read comics because she just doesn't. She looks at a page and she doesn't know which way to look. I've explained it to her and such, but just going top left to bottom right seems easy, but it's kind of it's a way of thinking that that maybe has to be fostered when you're younger or something. But they've done studies where the connection between the halves of the brain, the hemispheres of the brain, is better in people who read comics when they were younger. I think there's a little bit of a writer or artist inside every comic book fan. There's, I remember sketching out my favorite heroes and characters when I was a kid, always drawing one thing or another. And as a big fan of books in general, I've always got plots turning over in my head. When I was in high school, I did 2 issues of the Henderson Nerd Posse, which was me and my geeky friends driving around fighting crime. And so there's probably a dozen copies of them out there somewhere. But I sent them to people to get reviewed, and there was a big zine community where you could trade things. You'd send them a copy of your zine, and they'd send you a copy of theirs. So random people all over the country have seen my shameful comic. But yeah, I think it's a big part of fandom for people to do their, work on their own creations. And even now, I try to support local artists by having their zines and their comics in the shop as much as possible. And we do events where people come and draw in the shop and talk about stories, and it's not just a one-way street of a medium. It's great because people do their own stuff all the time. I wanted something that reflected the area because a lot of my focus is on local comics, local creators. We have a section just for people who live, in the city of Somerville. When I first opened, I sent a couple emails to some art mailing lists, and got at least 3 or 4 people who had already been doing mini comics within like a 6-block area of the shop. So it's a very artsy area. So the idea of a hub, well, first of all, Boston is known as the hub of the universe. I think Oliver Wendell Holmes called it that, kind of jokingly. And so Hub Comics kind of refers to Boston, and the idea of a hub, the center of activity, was also, it was a good vision for what I envisioned, for what I thought the shop should be. With lots of different artists coming together and people and fans, being part of the community.